And I can't believe you write it and then you can transcribe it. That's how my system works. I know. I'm a note taker because I don't know that I'd be able to fill in the details as well. Well, it helps to have the recording, honestly, when I have doubts or something. Yeah, it really is helpful to have that.
I was sending you things to
Just
do
to
today.
record it the next day, and the next day, and the next day. It takes 3 days to get through. Anybody on that district concern?
Oh, did you? 5 minutes. I'm like,
I heard you got some.
Would you be interested in something? So this is to have my name show up on the ballot. My name, oh, sorry, I just flipped the papers. My name, I have so many signatures that. Okay, so Representative John, my name is Suzanne. Usually the colorful hair. Is the-
Yeah, I knew what you
Yeah, so, yeah.
in the middle.
I do, yeah.
You're excited now.
No, that's.
Oh, that's you.
No, that's
Me,
not-
it's just stupid.
I love
No,
that,
but
actually
you-
make it feel
All right.
right off the. Oh.
Here we go, everybody.
all right, folks, we're gonna get going here.
I do that.
Recording in progress.
I'm gonna call this meeting of the Addison Central School District to order. Today is January 17th at 5:30. I'm Victoria Jetty. Why don't we start with introductions down here?
Matt Renting, Director of Finance and Operating.
Jen Newseater.
Chip Malcolm.
Ryan Bauer.
Suzanne Buck.
Peter Rose, Superintendent. Jamie McCallum.
Joanna Doria. Barbara Wilson.
Mary Gill. Mary Heather Noble.
And Steve Ochen.
Will Hatch, Technology Director.
Nicole Carter, Director Equity and Student Services.
Caitlin Steele, Assistant Superintendent of TGMA.
And Lindsay, I see you online.
Hi, Lindsay Hescock. I can hear you guys, but I can't see anything. It's just black. I don't know if it's on my end or.
No, I
Is it on,
It's
her?
on there.
It's
Yeah,
on
it's
your
showing
end.
on ours.
We can't see you either.
I'm being told it's on your end.
Okay.
So your video camera looks like it's X'd out, like it's not on.
Did you lift up your?
I did turn my camera off just so that to try to have better audio.
So I don't know if that does, well, no, because you've done that in the past with them.
Yeah.
You should have to have your camera on.
Right.
Yeah. All
Yeah,
right.
that's what I thought.
And are there
The
any,
only attendee is MCTV, so I don't know who we could ask.
okay.
Oh, can you see? Do you see?
Yeah, I do.
Do you see the video line? Okay. CTV's here and they're confirming that they can see actually.
Okay, well, we can hear you and you can hear us, so that's a good halfway. All right, as always, we'll open up to public comment. If you're here for public comment, please raise your hand. There's nobody on Zoom, so. All right, moving on to, can I get a recommendation to approve the minutes of January 9th?
I'll second it.
Great, Suzanne and Barb.
Can I make a comment? I do
Yes,
this
you
a
may.
lot, I realize, but Mary Heather writes wonderful minutes for a very complicated discussion, having read the 11 pages, all right? No, I'm not, I'm honest, but that's what we needed. If you weren't at the meeting, all right, it was well represented, in the fact that a lot of different points of view and other things were brought up. It was titled by the people that were making them, which was, I think, important at that point. And I congratulate her because I have no skill in doing that. So I know how important and difficult it is. So thank you very much.
You're here. Thank you, Mary. Any other questions or comments regarding the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Great, Mary Gill abstains. Chip, Liz.
It's a lot simpler than minutes, that's for sure. We read the bills yesterday and you did today, yeah, thank you. There were 4 payroll warrants and the 1 general fund warrant. The general fund warrant is for $904,598.11. As I often do when we have a big one like this, there was almost 230 something thousand in transportation. And there was probably 40,000 in the health plan, VE. So that makes up a large percentage of that 900. Now, I don't know why that comes at certain times, but just so you understand, at times there's a lot there that makes up the big number. The other payroll warrants, the first one is for $181,925 and $25.51. Second one is for $673.94. Third one is for $165,711.05. And the fourth one is for $878,703.26. There wasn't any problem with it. I can't explain always why there tends to be this rather up and down part. Sometimes we don't have much and other times we have a lot, but obviously it's how some things are paid.
How things are due.
Yeah.
This is coach's salary, holiday bonus.
Yeah.
Ask about that.
I make motion that we pay the bills as presented.
And I'll second it.
Can I have a question?
Yes, you do.
Matt, I saw your letter to the bus company about the disruption in service. Are we compensated at all, or is it? Okay,
So, I don't know about historically if we've kept good track of the missed routes, but it seems like it's kind of coming to a head this year with how many we've seen.
Right.
So we've been tracking it and, keep careful records, and then they reimburse us for every miss.
okay.
I do have a question. And I would have asked Melissa this first, but I was there after she left. So I noticed a line item for Truett's Commons that was for ACSD central office plans for like $8,000, and I was kind of wondering what that was.
So that was, I don't think Bruce is here right now, but he has been researching with the central office kind of somewhat in flux. We're looking at this building and then there was also plans looking at the high school as we're running out of space essentially and looking at where we could be housed if the central office can be used for other services. You probably know we recently had to move. We've moved a number of employees around out of offices. We had some employees in our conference room in the central office for a while. They've now moved back to where they were. So as we look at some of those flexible pathways that we talked about, we're starting to realize that we are running out of space in Middlebury. We have space outside, but the transportation is the main issue that we have in terms of some of the space outside of Middlebury. Yeah, that's what that
I
was. Yeah.
was like, oh, because I hadn't heard anything about
Yeah.
plans, so that's
Well, they're probably going to stay there because they're so expensive that
right.
the cost per square foot now is astronomical.
Yeah.
Really
Thank
is.
you.
Yeah.
Great, any other questions or comments about the bills? All right, all those in favor of paying the bills as read, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, we can pay bills. Dr. Burrows.
Okay, so we are here to do a final pass of the budget, present kind of our kind of final granular level of information on FY24. We feel pretty good about this. We wanted to show the board tonight some comparative data too. So we've looked at kind of across our region, both local region and larger region, where our budget falls in relation to other districts. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to discuss taxes and each individual town. I think this is helpful for all of you to kind of assimilate as people in your community start asking you about, why is our tax rate going up by this or that? Or we heard that, the state had all this additional money in the ed fund. Why is my tax rate still going up? So we'll talk through that in detail for each town. And then some final comments on the budget book. The warning that was attached under the report of the superintendent shouldn't be there, and apparently it opens in another language. So
Scramble.
the actual warning is down
Is in the
below.
next piece.
It's under report of the board. Okay, so you can open it if you want to, but it's
I've
I'm not
probably
sure you'll be able
infected
to
my
read it,
computer with
so,
whatever it's.
Oh my goodness.
so. You should see the board meeting presentation attached there. And that's what Matt is going to now take us through.
Board meeting presentation.
Yeah.
So, thanks for bearing with me last time. I think, trying to look at the draft version of the budget book and look at all the relevant information contained within the budget book was sort of a hard format to scroll through everything here. So we wanted to just circle back to some of the tax rate calculations, break them apart by town, and just walk through town by town, so that everybody here can get a feel for where your town's going to be at tax rate wise next year. And then as Dr. Burrow said, talk a little bit about where we stand within the county and within the state in terms of our budget numbers. And in order to kind of bring an example through each town, we took a sample home with a value of 300,000. And did the calculation all the way through with no income sensitivity. Income sensitivity is a gradient, which is going to affect every home owner a little bit differently. 66% of Vermonters receive some sort of income sensitive tax credit. So it's really a moving target. It's hard to go apples to apples. So we kind of carried that fixed $300,000 figure through for each town. But then we also showed some of the income sensitive data as well. Taking the ACSD average tax rate and calculating it on that house gives us that first number of 5147, which is a kind of a good baseline to set your mind as we go through. A household earning $60,000 in income would be eligible for $3,606 in property tax credits, which would reduce their obligation to $1,541. So again, a lot of these numbers are not necessarily going to be accurate to what the person or what the family hypothetically owning this home would be paying, but in order to get apples to apples data, it's just sort of our fixed amount.
And one thing to keep in mind that this happens the following year,
Correct.
right? So there could be a year lag, so they could get a bill that's higher, and then the following year, the rebate or the credit takes effect. It's based on your current income tax.
It's based on whatever, so when you do your 2022 taxes.
Right.
Your tax bill that comes out.
Out in the following November, right?
That's when you get your
Yeah.
rebate would be on that tax bill.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so starting with Bridgewater, you can see right at the top there, $1.40. So every town in the district is gonna start with that exact same district-wide tax rate, $1.40. That comes from our budget, that is fixed across each town. Each town then gets factored in their CLA, which is the
Common level of
indicator.
appraisal.
That's right, the common level of appraisal, and it's, an equalizing factor that's gonna adjust every town's tax rate so that they're paying their fair share based on, the ratio of home prices to assessed home values, home sale prices, so.
And one of the ways that has been helpful for me over the years to explain this is when it's below 100%, you're going to get taxed more because essentially a home in Bridport is right now, the assessment value is about 80% of the market value. So they want to tax you more because they want to tax you on the market value, not on what the current assessed value is, which has not kept up with market trends. So that's essentially how this operates.
Well, and because you try to reassess or reappraise at a minimum less than every 10 years. But Bridport's last CLA last year was in the 90s, and because of the crazy home sales that came in, that's really driven us down. We are in the process of being reappraised, but 2-year cycle.
And a low CLA will oftentimes be something that will trigger the reappraisal.
Well, by state law, yes, it will re-trigger it.
Middlebury just recently redid
Yeah.
a reassessment, and they're down to 83% now.
Wow.
Really? Already?
Yeah, theirs was done, what, 3
Pretty
years ago?
surprising. Yeah,
It
that
is
was
how fast it
2
is.
years
Ours
ago,
was
maybe.
done, yeah, less
Well,
than.
it's not, remember, it's the home sales that screw
Oh,
it.
yeah, absolutely.
It's been a really interesting home sale
It's been
year,
a ride.
as everyone knows.
Yeah.
It's been a really hot market, so I think a lot of the CLAs are kind of a indicator of that real estate market over the last year or so. Using Bridport CLA gets us a tax rate of $1.77, which is a 6-cent increase from last year. And then remember that $300,000 house, without any income sensitivity, that's gonna net out to a $15 per month increase for that hypothetical. Again, that same figure, that full price tax bill is $442.50 with no credit applied. If you apply the credit of $60,000 household income and then divide it by 12, you get that bottom monthly figure, so 142. In Cornwall, starting with the same $1.40, Cornwall CLA this year is 85.67. It's a town tax rate of $1.63, which is down from last year. That nets out to $22.50 of savings per month for that hypothetical homeowner. You can see the other monthly figures there. I'm just gonna go through
Is
all
the
the
bullet
towns.
supposed to say monthly or is those annual? On the, if it's a 22.5 per month.
Mhm.
I
Yep,
guess-
that should be annual.
Shouldn't that be annual? Because
Annual
isn't
credit
that
of
12
4
times
months.
22.5 to come up with the 407?
Yeah.
No, so the 2250 is the impact of this year's CLA on tax rate relative to what a homeowner was paying last year. So at a higher tax rate last year, they were paying $22.50 per month more in taxes.
But are they paying $407, or they would have been paying?
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's the
Total.
total, that's not the delta. Right.
22 is.
Okay, that's where I was confused. I was
Yeah.
thinking of the delta.
No, so that bold number is really like the net change, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
got it.
Gotcha.
Sorry about that.
But for scale, I included those monthly things.
Got it.
I'd say 2250 is, 2250 is a delta of what, on top of what, right, so.
Yeah.
And so again, like you can think of, the monthly tax bills falling somewhere in the 450 range, no credit, down to the 150 range with credit.
Jen has a question.
Do other towns get monthly tax bills?
No, what I think what
Okay.
he's saying is take the tax bill, divide it by 12, and this is what you would have to put away every month.
Just a way for people to think about it.
Alright, I just didn't know if like my town was the only town that,
No, we have annual, or.
Okay.
Biannual.
Biannual.
when then you referred to monthly tax bills, and I'm like, wait a second, like maybe it applies to other people better than it applies to me, I think of it as annually and we pay it in 2 different installments.
Right.
If we want to, by
Some quarterly, I
choice.
think, too, right?
Thank you.
Middlebury came in at 83.88, so that resulted in a 1 cent tax rate increase. A 1 cent tax rate increase sugars out to a delta of $2.50 per month. That would be added to that monthly charge of $417.50. Again, you're down in the 100s with income credits.
That's pretty interesting if you said that you were at like near 100% before and it's now been reduced to 84%. Your taxes aren't actually changing that much.
Well, it will change.
In the future.
It will change because, our school tax will change. So we're gonna end up paying more because our assessment is lower.
What he's saying is just 1 cent.
Yes, that's what it ends up being. But you, like, if you're at 100% or above, then your tax is lower than the $1.40.
Right.
If you're lower than 100, it's
Oh, the
higher
dollar.
than $1.40.
Right, but I guess just compared to last year versus this year.
Yeah, but we just got reappraised, what, 2 or 3 years ago?
3 years
and
ago.
we
3 years
were
ago.
over,
Okay, and if
we
the
were at the
district tax
100%
rate
and
is that
it's
low, then why?
already
Okay.
dropped. Because
Got it.
when you get into the upper 70s, it triggers that you have to reassess.
There's also the whole thing that some towns, it may be 1 or 2 or 3 properties that totally change it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's not hundreds of properties that change hands in
Right.
Cornwall in 1 year. In Middlebury, there's not hundreds either, probably, but it's potentially
Smaller.
more than the smaller
Density
towns.
definitely plays a factor, right?
Huge thing. It'd be
Yeah,
one
shift.
really expensive house on the lake in Bridport that could change the thing.
Well, and also what changed this year was people buying sight unseen, paying well more than
Right.
what
Asking
assessed values were, and just outbidding anybody just to get any piece of property, so that property values just went through the roof.
Yeah, everywhere.
Excuse me, do we know how many people who did a lot of these purchases actually reside in the community, or are some of them only part-time residers? So that changes the tax, right, if
Well,
they're,
to reside, you need,
How many
to get
months
the
out of the year?
homestead tax rate, you have to be a resident.
You have to be a
like
resident.
full-time,
Full-time
okay.
resident, you cannot say that you're a resident anywhere else.
only come
Might
up
be
on
more than-
weekends or something,
Is it more than half a year that you have?
It's over 180 days, you have to be here
over 180 days.
to be full-time.
That's not that much.
Just
But
like
they're still
the guys
paying
that go to
non-residential,
Florida.
right, which is
Yeah.
has a different calculation.
Okay,
Non-residential rate is cheaper because they feel that people that have a second home and can afford a second home are not putting kids in school, they aren't using like the fire department, well, maybe they might be.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they are doing these
Let's hope
other
they are.
things, so they have a lower tax rate because supposedly they aren't using the services.
But non-homestead also applies to, commercial, industrial properties. Yeah, so
that's a hit to us.
Ripton's down at 79, which is actually net savings this year of $22.50 per month. Salisbury. I think Salisbury and Bridport might be the top 2 in terms of net increase this year. So we have $1.84 there for the tax rates. $15 per month delta. That full price monthly at $460, after credits, $160. Shoreham, got 82.9, so a little bit closer to that average assessed price there in Shoreham. Up 4 cents, $10. Weybridge, also up 4 cents, also $10. Any questions on CLAs by town? Or should we move on to the comparative analysis? So this is as of today, the superintendents, what's the group called?
CVSA.
CVSA has a running chart of all of the reported budget data. So as of today, these are the numbers that we have available to us. And it's just sort of a marker of where we're at relative to the other districts in the county and in the state. Again, there are some that haven't reported this yet, so this is who we have. The first chart here is going to be the percentage of expenditure budget increase. So that's sort of the big total number.
And can I just interject here for 1 second? These numbers were put into a chart at various times, so some of them may have shifted slightly. Some of this was when districts started this process late December. So this is for just kind of like a broad brushstroke. Some of these numbers may have shifted slightly as they've looked at putting fund balance towards the budget, things like that, which I know some superintendents were talking about. So just wanted to contextualize it.
And are we all looking at the same data? Because in the past, we used to do total budget versus, just whatever it's called, the expenditure, budget. Because like for us, it would have only been 2% had we used the total budget versus the 8.7%, right?
Right.
So that could, if not everyone's using the same line on the budget, it would make it different too.
We did use the general fund total instead of the
Yeah.
total expenditures because total expenditures has things like ESSER in it,
Yep.
which in the revised budget from last year would have been this sort of monolith of $3 million that kind of messes with all the percentages. It doesn't really have doesn't affect the voters at all. So.
And that's what this is.
It is.
It's all
everybody's using
expenditures?
Yeah, that's all I was
Yeah.
wondering. Yeah.
It's a good question.
So ACSD will be in orange in each of the 4 charts. The circle is going to be Addison County, and then you've got the rest of the state outside of that. So Mount Abe did not list a number for this first chart, but they do have some other ones, which you'll see later on.
And that was because Lincoln's coming out of their budget, so there was no real comparative for this number.
You can see a lot of people are in that 5 to 10% increase range, and we're sort of seated in the middle of that as well. Within the county, you can see that Addison Northwest is looking at a relatively large increase this year, and that'll pop up in the next couple of charts as well. But again, that kind of places us somewhere in the middle.
Do you know which or if any of these other districts are taking on like a new debt burden, like a bond?
I believe Winooski is because of their.
They definitely are.
They have a huge rebuild.
Yeah.
And again, like, what's not here is Burlington.
Right.
The Career Center, another one that
Yeah.
take a look at, but
Is Addison Northwest? I can't.
They're there.
They're
Yeah, they're the ones
They're
that
not.
are, oh, they're not taking.
I think that's, I'm not sure what, I know that the equalized pupil number is related to enrolled, equalized pupil number going down, but I don't know of anything outstanding there that would impact their spend.
This next chart takes that big top total number and distills it down to that ed spending per equalized pupil amount, which we use at the bottom of that budget summary. And you can see here, we're by far the smallest percentage increase among the county, and are also seated pretty nicely in the middle among available state data. Again, I'm not sure in Addison Northwest what's triggering this big spending increase.
Yeah, I thought one of our prior meetings, it was brought up that they were taking on a debt load, but maybe I'm imagining it.
There's some building project they were looking at.
Yeah, that's what
I thought
Mount
some names that
Northwest,
they were
yeah.
going to maybe work on their buildings, so they were gonna like incorporate $1 million into their
There's some-
facilities budget,
Yeah.
you know, within
I
the
can
regular
find out.
district budget, but not
Yeah.
on.
I just remember it being
Yeah.
brought up.
They did, they renovated their theater and some of their other like HVACs and things, but that was 3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
The next chart goes over the net difference in tax rate, so increase or decrease. As we just showed earlier, we have a 15-cent tax rate decrease, which puts us on the right side of the line. You can see that the state's kind of mixed in terms of results, but that within our county, we're the only one who's seeing a net decrease in base countywide or district-wide tax rate this year.
What would impact Milton's by
Yeah, that's.
Yeah,
that's
it's crazy.
so much?
That's amazing.
I think it would have to be that they were cutting going into this year, so they were able to, and they, I guess that would, yeah, I guess that, or
maybe they
the
put
bond,
money
a bond finished up, and so they were no longer carrying a bond. That would do it too.
Yeah, it's
But
true.
they're showing an 11% increase in ed spending per equalized pupil.
Right.
It's not like,
So that would point to like a bond, right? Because that backs
Oh,
out
okay.
that number.
Like a debt load, yeah.
That isn't our purpose though, honestly. We don't
Yeah.
know
No,
what
no.
the other, we're just trying to see if we're all in the same boat here.
Yeah. Just wanna know what they did.
thank you, Kim.
What's their
Thanks for being
secret?
I'm also interested.
The last chart here
Mine.
I am too, but not tonight.
So fun.
is the cost per equalized pupil by district. And as you can see here, we're pretty well seated within our county, and sort of on the upper side of the cost per pupil across the state.
Although I will interject, it does become more important when we were dealing with a top level that we couldn't pass,
Yeah.
okay? Couldn't go over, which was obviously the name of the game a while ago. So that was a totally different ballgame than it is right now. Whether that returns and whatever they said, 27 and 28.
Yep, and there are a few notoriously high-spending districts who aren't represented yet in this data, so I think that, you have to solve that.
Well, I guess the other thing, I'm sorry to interject.
Yes, we have.
I guess the other thing that I'm wondering is, as we look at taking on a bond, doing a bond process and thinking about what that is the impact that will have on our, next upcoming budgets and cost per pupil, what that will look like. So that's another thing to anticipate.
Well, look at what happened to the career center. I mean, there's a prime example right there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we have a very low bond payment rate.
It's just something to keep in mind for the future. It will have an impact on our.
The cost per, the bond isn't in the cost per pupil, is it? Is the bond?
It's not in it's not in the cost per pupil, no.
And that's
You
what
can back out any kind of educational facility. You can't back out some facilities
Yeah.
that you can't prove have an educational
Right.
impact. The Addison Northwest is primarily salaries, so they resell with support staff and teachers, and those costs are going up. Not a bond.
Got it.
All right, the last little tidbit for me today is, for this slideshow at least, is that the new budget book is available on Board Pack, new update. You'll see the new infographic headers, which give the enrollment and FTE data for each school, sort of at the top of each school's page. And then there are some appendices at the back end, which give some historical data. Barb, I did put a warning for the warning in there relative to that total number, but that didn't make the cut for this upload, but it's on there.
No worries, yeah, thank you.
And, there'll be probably one or two more brushes through with the fine tooth comb to make sure all of those acronyms are nicely explained and finish off the photos, but we're feeling like we're pretty close to done here on the budget book, so. That's there for you to peruse at your leisure, and that's it for me on this. Kick it back to Dr. Burrows.
Thank you. And the budget book, which we call the budget book as we're working on the budget, also becomes the annual report that we send along to our communities. So we will be working on that over the next few days. Heather has been in touch with all of the different select boards and towns to be sure that they're getting what they need. It's kind of a helter-skelter week or so as they're trying to put things together. We're working in that warning window. So it's great that we're able to, assuming that we're there. This is the 17th is, as I mentioned last week, is a really good time for us to be finishing this up, and it gives us enough time. Some years we have gone to like the 22nd, 23rd, and then it's really, really tight. And it's tight on the towns more so than on us. And so this is helpful for all those people that are putting this info together. So I think that's our presentation. Any questions about the budget or?
What about this fund balance?
We're going to get to that.
Oh, okay.
Morning, just like the
Okay,
general
okay.
presentation here, yeah. More questions? Okay. So next topic here is the fund balance, I'm not sure what language that warning is in. Somebody pull this up here. So we, Matt and I talked about this a bit, and you can see Matt's memo to the board. We feel like at this time, there are many, many things that we could put this money towards. The way that the capital reserve works, if the board does approve this, we would come back to the board at whatever time we've kind of put together a plan of here's how we think this 1.5 would benefit us, and looking at our priorities. One of the things we're thinking about is pushing forward a little bit more with our bond thinking, and which is why we didn't come tonight with, if you probably remember, we came with a cafeteria one year, we came with a list, like a mixed list another year. When it goes out to the voters, we don't have that information. It's always just a number, but it helps people to know about it. This year we felt, because we were right in the middle of all that priority 1, priority 2 conversation, that it would help us to make these kinds of decisions closer to kind of end of spring as opposed to right now. So our plan is to come back, if you do approve of moving this to the capital reserve, that we would come back in probably April, as we've kind of consolidated a vision around what the bond direction might be, to make an ask for the 1.5. It can sit in here. That money can sit for 3 years, I believe, is the time frame before it has to be spent, as opposed to our ed reserve, which that money can go in for as long as you need to keep it in there. So that is our recommendation.
And then the second page, those are just the potentials.
Yep. there's some ideas, but
Ideas of
yeah.
what might.
And it's something we had a conversation with the finance committee, Chip, I don't know if you
Yeah,
wanna-
yeah, I mean, Barbara wasn't there, but Steve and I were there, and we discussed this and basically agreed with the recommendation, because we couldn't really formalize, prioritize things at that point, as we did with the kitchen work a year ago. Just quick question on the health fund was gonna go into the ed fund?
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
it did.
It
Yeah,
did,
so
okay. Yes,
we have finally taken care of that.
right, okay.
Yeah,
But it was the ed fund, not the capital fund.
Yeah.
And that's because that can sit there the entire
Yeah.
time,
And that was that
not have to
200,000.
be spent until needed.
We won't talk about HRA reserve
Yeah.
ever again.
Yeah.
Just a dumb question. What's MPCP facility? On just the wish list or the parking lot list?
Oh,
Number 3.
Yeah, number 3.
so ACP, which is over,
What is ACP?
so do you wanna talk about it?
ACP is the alternative program that we run with Addison Northwest and
Oh,
Mount
and
Maine.
that's at the,
Vermont Sun.
okay,
And
Vermont
then
Sun.
it's the middle.
Okay,
So
got
there's
it.
a second program.
Got it.
Thank you.
I just didn't associate
So
it.
it's not,
Sorry, I have a
the
question.
end isn't open yet, but it's coming next year.
For sure. So right now, we don't have middle school students there, but we hope to with this program. Okay.
Yeah, got it. Thank you. Acronyms.
All right, so then this will get approved as part of the,
It's
Warning.
Article 2.
Got
In the warning. My recommendation would be to approve each article, just so it's clear.
Okay.
I mean, you could probably just approve the warning as a whole, but
Well, we vote on them separately, so.
Yeah.
I mean, we the voter, not
yeah,
the board.
right. Yeah, we're not there yet.
Yeah.
I have a question about this list.
Yep.
Do we need 4 classrooms at MUMS? I'm not saying I'm just meaning that. I'm not saying we don't. I'm just asking I don't remember how can someone explain to me how this list got made? I don't remember this.
So that list is just a draft list that, we're working on. It's like what hypothetical fund balance projects could be. None
Okay.
of those things were immediate enough to require a recommendation for the fund balance to be used on them. And should not have been part of the memo to the board. The recommendation for the classrooms at MUMS was a hypothetical project, I think, that would help address spatial
Right.
concerns.
Yeah, it came from the administration at the middle
Brought up by
school,
the
talking
administration.
about.
Okay.
And some of it has to do with what we talked about earlier, which is flexible pathways and space for students that are not in the general ed classroom. Not that that's what that would be for necessarily, but
Okay.
and this is 4 things. There are 40 others too.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So
Okay.
Right, so for our purposes, we're not necessarily approving those 4 items at this point. We're just saying we have this fund balance, we could defer taxes with it, which would then show up as income. That next year we wouldn't have as income, that would then look like we're increasing our taxes, or ed spending by 15, is that $1.5 million?
Yeah.
Or we can put it someplace else, which they're recommending to put it in capital reserve. We could put it in ed reserve or something else. But with so many facilities needs and I think what they're saying is let's put it in capital. There's some kind of cool wish list things, but we also know that there's just like
Different
roofs and
maintenance, yeah.
general maintenance maintenance that may need attention too, that we could use instead of doing as much of a bond, we could, you know, start working on some of those things, as part of, instead of putting that into the bond. So I think that's our idea here, is that when we go to a vote on this, it's just, we wanna put that money toward potential facilities needs or defer taxes essentially, or put it in an ed reserve. We have to do something with that fund balance.
And since it's money that comes from the community, it's in their tax dollars, we have to ask them for permission to use it. We can't just do it.
And the different pots that we're looking at for facilities are this capital reserve. We've increased our budget for maintenance this year because costs have gone up astronomically and our needs continue to grow in that area. We've kept a flat budget for many years. The maintenance budget has stayed pretty flat. So we made a change there. So we'll be looking at kind of all these dollars to figure out how we probably, essentially shoestring to what, my hope is a bond that will enable us to take care of some of the things that, aren't like a cutting edge classroom 2023, but at least are, dealing with boilers and roofs and some of the other infrastructure that, if we let it go too long, it compounds other things, and then we're in an even tougher situation.
So after moving to capital reserve, these funds can become emergency backstop for, facilities, emergent needs over the course of the year, but they can also begin development of some of those like areas of improvement, which the wish list is there, but it's also something that has that bond and facilities master plan take shape. That fund balance might show its best strategic use over the course of time. So I think that at the committee level in the facilities and finance committee, we'll probably start looking at some of those areas of investment more closely and studying those as a potential use and bringing it back up from there.
Do we currently have any funds in the capital reserve?
The capital reserve holds the funds that are earmarked for the high school
cafeteria.
teaching, but they're all
So just
encumbered by
that
that project, yeah. So
They're all.
there's money in there, but it's already spent.
There's not enough in there, actually.
Yeah.
Even for the kitchen.
Yeah, we've had
More than
to
they
scale it
expected.
down and scale it down because it came outward.
And we
I just have a question on clarity. When you, and Suzanne, you had mentioned this, local tax dollars are what funds this, is where this money came from? Or, and did they pull out the, general state ed money out of that, or is this, it's all what we got last year from the, okay,
Yeah,
It's
it's
what was
not,
left.
yeah.
okay,
It's what we
A
didn't
third of
spend.
it's local tax dollars.
okay, I just didn't know if they took out,
The voters voted it though.
Voters
Yeah.
voted it, so
So-
they voted it, so we have to then turn around and ask them
Okay.
for permission, we can't
Okay.
just.
Because they voted on spending it.
right, okay, I just didn't know if the
Yeah,
state
but
took back.
their dollars make up a third of
Right.
our budget. A third is non-residential, a third is other state revenue,
Okay.
roughly.
just to emphasize, Jen was talking about 3 different approaches in the different reserves, and one is a tax rebate. It creates a cliff
Yes.
that we will, that the tax rate will jump once that goes away. We're already looking at a couple of cliffs, ESSER being one of the big ones. I would strongly recommend against creating another cliff.
Right.
So,
We've only done that once.
I know.
In my whole time on boards here, only once did we ever do it, and that was because we had to stay below the threshold. And that was at a time that was really important to stay below the threshold. We didn't like it because we discussed it. In fact, it was 800,000 and the board, after multiple discussion on that, settled on
500.
500, I think, or what, we went back and forth in that process a lot. So that was a very, I wouldn't say contentious, but we all had very different ideas as to how to manage that, and that was the compromise. Only once. I don't want to do it again either.
That was to avoid the cliff that year that we were on.
So do we need a motion to approve each of these articles? Is that how you're wanting us to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're done with my report, any other questions for me? Yeah, I mean, I think adopting the budget and then taking action on the warnings. I mean, adopting the budget, historically, someone's made a motion to adopt the budget in the amount of, and then has read the language there.
Sure.
And then the same thing would go for I think the other articles too, just reading through each one, I think makes sense.
So, sure, I'll move that, we approve the Addison Central School District budget to, $42,269,305, which is the amount the ACSD school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year. It's estimated in this proposed budget will result in education spending of $21,663 per equalized pupil, and the projected spending per equalized pupil is 8.1% higher than spending for the current year.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Make sure that
Yep.
Oh, right.
Lindsay?
Any abstentions? Lindsay, did you vote with us?
Her microphone is muted.
Yes, she can't say us.
it's not important, but it's
Yep.
important.
Right.
Well, I mean,
Lindsay, if you're there, you can, we're assuming that you voted aye with us.
Do you want me to text her?
Yeah, do it.
Probably not for the minutes
Yeah.
though.
What's that?
Probably not for the
We can't
minutes though.
presume
Oh.
for a minute.
Oh, yeah, no.
No, but you can then get on and say,
We
Yeah,
can put
I
on
was
that she
just
was
saying
muted.
that she-
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll say, put your good.
All right, so I'm gonna say even without Lindsay that the budget, or that Article 1 has passed.
And I move to present Article 2 to the voters, that shall the voters of Addison Central School District vote to authorize the ACSD School Board to appropriate $1,520,974 of the FY 22 unassigned fund balance to the ACSD Capital Reserve Fund.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on this one? Article 2. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Brian abstains. All right,
And I'll move Article 3, which states, shall the voters of Addison Central School District vote to approve increasing the board stipend for each board member from $500 to $1,200 per year.
I'll second that.
any questions or comments on this one?
We have to vote on this one too, even though we've already voted on this one, I've already
But
been
this is for-
the meeting guys
This
saying
was like
no.
the article, I mean,
This is the
It's just
warning.
the
It's just
article.
the article, we're voting to
it's-
put the article on.
Right, you're voting to put this to the voters,
Okay.
not on whether
So
or
even though
not
I,
you approve.
I,
Right, I mean, I
didn't
would
kind-
assume
I-
you want to give the voters a chance
Okay.
to give their,
thank you for clarifying.
Oh, Lindsay.
I hear her. So Article 3, we have a motion and a second.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments on Article 3?
I'm sorry, can you just, who was the second?
Oh, the second was you.
Thank you,
Diana.
Steve.
Not Jen, no. I was.
That's
very
confusing,
confused
sorry.
out
It was a good question,
Yeah,
but
thank
because
you.
there were some of us that weren't in favor, but in fact, we lost that
I had the
battle,
same question,
and
Jen.
now we're putting it to the voters
Right.
with what the board approved, so.
Any other questions or comments on Article 3? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Lindsay, you have to.
Oh, she
keep
took
it
Any
off.
abstentions?
Took it off.
No. Seeing none, Article 3 passes. I mean,
Approved.
Be included on the
So Article 4, we've never read and approved that.
Yeah, we
That's- So process by charter.
All right. On,
There's action on the annual meeting.
what's that? Now we should do the annual meeting. All right. So now, we need to take action on the warning for the annual meeting of February 28th, 2023. Can I get a motion to approve the warning as presented?
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
The second part of the informational meeting, the informational meeting, a lot of what Matt just presented would be part of that presentation. Over the years, we've had many different ways to present the budget. Sometimes it was, here's the budget, guys, do you have any questions? Which I thought was always not a good way to do it, having been experiencing that as a board member at one point. And the other way is to go too detailed into it, which gets overwhelming. However, it is important to present it, and that includes just sort of giving people relevance as to how that affects them in whatever way they wish to take that information in. Which is what Matt did to some degree.
Any other questions or comments on this? No. Seeing none. All those in favor of approving the warning for the annual meeting of February 28th, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, the warning will be presented as.
I'll make one comment, just again, my senior experience here. The annual meeting used to take place in the gymnasium in the 80s, okay? There would be hundreds of people there. They were very contentious, especially the year that we voted for the Australian ballot for budget. That was an amazing meeting. It was my first year on the board. I remember it very well. So this is sort of boilerplate, nothing, but in the days of annual meetings, just for the high school, not obviously for ACSD, but for the high school, middle school at that point, it was pretty big stuff. The gym was full,
Yeah.
Interesting.
right, Suzanne?
Yeah, now we're in the band room and it's not full.
No. But we don't have, I mean, it's not the same type of issue, but just perspective of how governance works, at times it's a little bit boring, and other times it was not boring, let me tell you.
Mary Hogan had a cliffhanger that year too.
Huh?
There was a cliffhanger at Mary Hogan that year too.
Yeah. But, right, I mean, it
That
was
was.
a lot of people, because that was the only place, and now unfortunately, we've sort of lost a little of that, not that I want that contention, but the involvement
Yeah,
disappeared. And the only way people are involved is either coming here or going to the voting box and voting yes or no, which, whatever.
All right, Matt, thank you for all of your work on this. We've approved your budget as presented. Congratulations.
Also congratulate him in learning this.
Right.
Yeah, I
Did a
mean,
great
you have
job.
done amazingly
Thank you, Matt.
Big
well,
clarity.
not even 6 months
Yeah, lots of clarity.
in, yeah.
This is one big restaurant, man.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
I just have a clarifying question just for note-taking purposes. So I have notes and votes for each of the articles for the warning, the Australian ballot warning, but I do not have for the first action item on our agenda, which is adopting the budget.
Yeah, we did.
We did by
We did
reading
it
the
by,
first article.
we did it at the same time as the.
Okay,
I
just
think
want to
that
make
was-
sure that my
Item
notes.
one, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
one.
Article one.
That's how we've always done it.
And this probably doesn't matter, but Lindsay said she intended to vote yes on all of them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
And she texted you.
I texted her, I said, turn off your audio so you can vote. And she said, there's a delay.
Okay, thank you.
I pressed unmute like 10 seconds ago. I think I hope you can hear me now.
Yes. Thank you, Lindsay.
Sorry, guys.
No worries.
Okay.
Okay, on to amending, parental involvement policy. Mary, you wanna take this one?
Actually, I'm gonna hand this over to Caitlin because it's her bailiwick, but it's, my understanding it's a federal law and we have to, we're required, but
This is a model policy.
Yeah.
It's pretty boilerplate. The places that we have personalized it are obviously where our district name is and where you see the bullet points under the required sections. What's challenging I find about this policy is that it asks you for authentic stakeholder engagement to build it, but they prescribe most of what it's supposed to say. So we did our very best with authentic stakeholder engagement. We did include a survey that went out with our Hanover, at least a couple of questions that went out with a Hanover survey last year. But I partnered with Emily Blistein in doing some more authentic on the ground stakeholder engagement to think about what are the elements that need to really land in here so that this describes what we need to be doing in terms of engaging stakeholders. And then you'll see that it lists procedures. Those are written at the school level. And so I work with our Title I principals. They're the only ones who are required to have these procedures. Some of them have them finished. Some of them are still working on them. Our newer principals didn't have last spring to get started on it. So when this is approved and gets posted online, those procedures will be nested underneath it. They are also prescribed, the format of them.
I'm assuming that this is from the VSBA.
it is.
And you said that, that there were some things that you changed.
Yeah.
But I
For
don't
our
see
district.
anything on here that indicates what got changed from the boilerplate
Yeah,
policy.
so the boilerplate language, as I recall, is the numbered items, and then the bullet points underneath them are how we personalized it.
Got it.
So the ones that say, like, for example, in order to support increased parent guardian involvement, you put the bullet points and say, ensure that families feel welcome and supported at school.
That is what we, based on our stakeholder engagement and our sort of best professional judgment, determined this is what we will do here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And so I know this is policy, but sometime down the road, will the board see kind of like this is a snapshot of our results? So we have a sense of how are we, I hate having goals and objectives without ever seeing, what did we do? How did we do? Kind of thing. So personally, I would love to see how are we doing in this round, and then we can talk about, well, maybe we're not getting feedback here, we're not getting, feedback here.
I would love to talk more about what meaningful input would look like on that. I think that there's a lot, with our title grant management, there's a lot that's sort of prescribed and rather dry. And we can absolutely share that, much of it is public facing, but I would love to think about what would you really like to see to know how we're.
Just to know how we're,
Yeah, but I
we
think
have policies, how are we doing,
I think it comes back to the strategic plan report and what takes the place of that. Because a lot of, if you read through this, a lot of this information we included, not exactly in response to this, but a lot of these we respond to in there. Not as like our Title I students and our non-Title I students, but we have implemented like lower socioeconomic students, achievement, the work we do kind of beyond the quantitative work in terms of like qualitatively how our students doing. Frankly, I think in terms of the strategic plan and what will come from that should be a framework from which we assess how we're doing. And that's where I think we've talked about how do we use an equity lens to evaluate how we're doing. We should be talking, that process should give us the kind of definitive things that we're going to be looking for. And we talked about it in this last iteration with KPIs and early literacy and other measures to have something that we're longitudinally tracking so that we're not just kind of like picking data kind of like here and there, or only looking at summative data, which we get 8 months after students take it, and it's not really actionable in terms of what we're doing in schools, like what's happening in the classroom. Like it never gets down to that level. That to me is the exciting work that we're doing now, that I think at the end of this year we'll have a much better sense of what that kind of, I don't think it's a single report necessarily. I think it could be something that's more, it's got more flow to it, frankly. It doesn't just happen once a year.
And it just kind of jumped out because you see all of this data being gathered and it kind of triggered in my mind of, so but how are we doing?
And this might be getting in the weeds, but I think like the evaluation of how of Title I schools and gatherings, I think it's really great language and it's exciting. But then I'm reflecting back to the budget book, and thanks to Matt's snapshot at the beginning of each school, it's clear what schools are title schools or not. And I don't necessarily see anything reflected in the budget that like supports that. I was just looking at Ripton, and now we don't have an interventionist anymore, but it is a Title I school. It says
I wonder if there's a
zero.
typo in there.
There might be a
You should,
typo.
you have a 0.5 interventionist.
Okay, I didn't know if that's.
So we'll check and correct it. Hey, this idea of which schools are title schools is really, it's an interesting topic right now because our title, we receive our CFP funds based on sort of, it's a allocation based on a pretty general metric, which was just re-described to me. I can't remember what the metric is. It's not our FRL rates, but we use our FRL rates to determine which schools we allocate the Title I funds to. And it's a slightly different list of schools each year. And we were forecasting what we anticipate it will be next year based on our October counts, and our FRL numbers are so much lower than we expected that I think it's gonna be a very different list of schools. And so, the metrics that Peter's talking about are more global and looking at students all across the district. It will be easier to track those over time, but we can absolutely consider, are we actively flagging our Title I schools when we're sharing that data? I think that that's an important question for us to grapple with. Knowing that, because food is free now,
Right.
we're struggling to get an accurate count of families who would qualify for free and reduced price lunch. So it's a sort of a mushy metric right now.
I guess I think just for ease of looking at the budget book, if a school is flagged as a Title I school, with the allocation of the Title I funds, it should be identified of what how are those Title I funds being spent?
It's a great idea.
As being a person on the policy committee, I think it's always been sort of our goal to not only attach the procedures to the policies that are on the webpage, but also how are we doing, what's the, so I think that's a really important thing to consider. But I like the idea of doing it globally, looking at the strategic plan and the outcomes, but it is important to target certain things, I think, and highlight this relates to policy, blah, 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 or whatever, so that.
Okay.
These are just blanks.
Let's bring it back,
I'll do a motion that we approve,
that we amend.
we approve the amended or the updated VSBA policy, E1, entitled Title I, Part A, Parent and Family Engagement Policy.
Great, can I have a second?
I'll second.
Any further questions or comments?
My only initial kind of concern or question when I was reading this was, are we sort of overcommitting or overpromising and then becoming obligated to do certain things that may or may not be feasible with each school? And I just didn't know, and I didn't know if this came from, when I was reading it initially, if it was something that came from someplace else. And so I just didn't know if in your conversations you talked about that at all, or if there were certain things that you feel may be overcommitting a certain school or some schools.
The policy is at the district level, so it's not necessarily committing all things. As I was scanning back through it, I do think that the language says things like may include,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't say, and we will this, and this. I
Yeah.
think it's a valid question.
Yeah.
I think that we can overcommit and stretch ourselves too thin. And so perhaps we're the close read on that front.
But would we be able to change it though?
If we
You'd have to bring
go
it back.
forward here, we will need to change it here.
But the other
I
thing is
don't-
it's a global district policy, so it's not necessarily attached to a specific school.
Well, I guess if it wanted to be challenged, say I live in a school district where I feel like my child may not be receiving, name your thing, multiple modes of communication to collect input and feedback in a given year, and I might say, school and school district, this is what your policy says, why are we not getting that? I just wanna make sure that we're able to live up to what we're saying we can live up to, and just thinking about that with a critical eye. And anytime we make a policy, that's what I'm thinking of like, can we really do this? Especially if we're the ones that are making those bullet points. That was the only kind of comment that I had.
I guess the enforcement comes in the procedure.
Well, I had a comment, I guess that was similar to Jen's or building on Jen's maybe, and that is that, like under 7, it says nurture a school-based partnership groups to increase engagement of families around academics. Like, I think that the spirit of this is upping a certain commitment, or like engaging is more than, what was it before, involvements, right? It sort of is an active change, but also it doesn't have to be like, just what we are doing. Like if we're gonna nurture a school-based partnership, then that opens the way of communication to me, I guess this sounds like a friends of group. I'm not sure what was meant by this, but that can just open a line of communication that's not just us doing something, but us working with other people or whatever. And I feel like that doesn't mean this all falls on our shoulders, but it's like a way to think about engaging rather than just communicating information. That's what I read as the spirit of this change. Not that, like if someone comes back and says, you were unengaging to us, which is fine, I can imagine.
That's happened before.
I'm sure. But like, it's also about like, okay, well then let's engage. Like I feel like that's a reasonable thing, I think, but then this has ways in which we could do that as long as people get involved, or as people engage. There's a certain reciprocal thing that two-way street that involves. I think people want that, I imagine, and that's the spirit of this change was in response to some demand for more of that.
All right, so we have a motion on the table. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, are we ready to vote on this? Yes. Okay, all those in favor of
Well, it was her motion.
all those in favor of the motion that Suzanne presented about the parental involvement policy, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Brian abstains. Great. We've got ourselves an amended policy. Thank you very much. All right, moving on to other. Does anybody have any other for other? Seeing none, we will adjourn and then reconvene for executive session.
Well, are we really adjourning, or are you asking for us
We will need to
go
make a
into
motion.
executive session and
Need a motion to go into.
Yes, I'm asking for a motion to go into executive session at 6:43.
We have to specify what it's for, don't we?
Yes, so we go into executive session at 6:43 for the topic of personnel per statute, blah, 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 blah. I can't remember it off the top of my head.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All right. I don't think we have to vote. Do we have to vote on it? All those in favor of going into executive session?
Aye.
Right.
Any opposed? No. All right, thank you.